The transistor on the datasheet is not a transistor in your circuit. That gap between what the intrinsic device can do and what the device embedded in metal and silicon actually delivers is called parasitic overhead. And at 3 nanometers, it can be larger than the intrinsic transistor itself. This chart shows the qualitative breakdown of the total gate delay into intrinsic and parasitic contributions across technology nodes. At 65 nanometers, the intrinsic transistor still dominates. It's responsible for 70% of the delay. The parasitics are a tax you pay, but they're not running the budget. By 3 nanometers, that ratio has flipped. The intrinsic transistor might account for a quarter of the total delay. The surrounding metal contacts, junction resistances, fringing capacitances, and overlap capacitances, things that aren't even part of the transistor physics, account for the rest. Think about what that means for device engineering. You can improve the channel mobility by 20%. You can improve gate electrostatics. You can push the threshold voltage lower. If the channel is only contributing 25% of the total delay, a 20% improvement in channel performance delivers 5% improvement in circuit speed. The other 75% doesn't care what you did to the channel. This is why the terminology shifted in foundry presentations over the last decade. You stopped hearing transistor performance as the headline metric and started hearing cell delay and CV over I, metrics that capture both the intrinsic device and everything around it. The intrinsic transistor improved dramatically from 28 nanometers to 3 nanometers, but a significant fraction of those improvements went straight into the parasitic tax and never showed up in circuit speed. Understanding where those taxes are collected and how foundries are working to reduce them is what this video is about. Now, series resistance is the most direct parasitic penalty. Current flows from your supply rail into the transistor terminal, through the metal contact, through the silicide, through the source extension region, and finally into the intrinsic channel. Every one of those transitions has resistance, and they're all in series. The combined source plus drain series resistance, RSG, acts as a voltage divider. The voltage drop across RSD is simply the drive current times RSD. Now that voltage never reaches the channel. So the intrinsic device sees a drain source voltage lower than what you'd applied at the terminal, and a source voltage higher than ground. Both effects reduce drive current. At 65 nanometers, the channel resistance was large enough that RSD was a modest fraction of the total. At 3 nanometers, the channel resistance has dropped so far that RSD is now comparable to or larger than the RCH, or the channel resistance. The denominator shrunk, the numerator didn't. RSD is ohm microns normalized to transistor width, has been stubbornly difficult to scale. It's around 150 to 200 ohm microns for advanced nodes, and it hasn't improved nearly as aggressively as the channel resistance, partly because contact areas shrink with each node, raising contact resistance, partly because the extension regions become shallower and more resistive. The physics of this are different from channel physics, and they respond to different engineering interventions. Now, the direct consequence is that any IV curve you see for a 3 nanometer transistor is showing you a device where the applied voltage is split between the RSD and the channel. The slope of that curve at high drive current, the linear region output conductance, is heavily influenced by RSD. A transistor with great intrinsic current density can still show disappointing saturation current if RSD is high enough. Contact resistance is its own subproblem inside the series resistance budget. It is the resistance at the specific interface where the metal contact lands on the semiconductor. the transition from metal to silicide and highly doped silicon. The resistance is characterized by the specific contact resistivity, or ρC, in units of ohm centimeters squared. It represents how much of resistance you can get per unit contact area. The lower ρC, the lower the contact resistance for a given footprint. Now, ρC depends exponentially on two things: the potential energy barrier at the metal semiconductor interface and the carrier effective mass. Tunneling through a thin barrier dominates at high doping concentrations, which is why you need very heavily doped source drain regions directly under the contact. The problem is the shrinking contact area. Each node, the contact footprint shrinks. If ρC stays constant, the contact resistance, which is ρC divided by area, goes up inversely with area. ρC has improved through material engineering, but not fast enough to offset the area reduction. Titanium silicide was the standard through the 1990s. Then cobalt silicide gave lower ρC for smaller contacts. Then nickel silicide. At 14 nanometers, Intel introduced metal fills for contacts and then moved to tungsten and cobalt. At 5 nanometers and 3 nanometers, ruthenium and molybdenum are being evaluated for contact pillars. Each material transition is a response to the same pressure. Contact area is shrinking faster than the ρC is improving. So you need a new material to reset the budget. And unlike channel engineering, where strain and high K were one-time step improvements that lasted for years, contact material transitions are node by node. By 3 nanometers, contact resistance accounts for more than half the total RSD budget. It is not a parasite on the edge of the story. It is the dominant term. Now, resistance slows you down by dropping voltage. Capacitance slows you down by taking charge. And the gate of a transistor, in the process of controlling the channel, also capacitively couples to the source, the drain, and the interconnects nearby, charging all of those unintentionally with every switching event. Overlap capacitance is the component where the gate electrode physically extends over the drain extension region. The gate oxide sits between them. Charge distributed on the gate must displace charge on the drain extension, that's a capacitor. It's there because you need some gate drain overlap to ensure the channel forms all the way to the drain junction, but it directly couples the input to the output. Fringing capacitance is smaller in effect but different in origin. The gate has sidewalls, vertical faces of the source and drain sides. Field lines emanate from those sidewalls and terminate on the source and drain epitaxial regions. Even if there is a low-K spacer dielectric between gate and source drain, these fringing fields exist. Now here's what makes these capacitances dangerous beyond their physical size. Gate-to-drain capacitance CGD appears across an inverting gain stage. The Miller effect multiplies its effective value at input by 1 plus the magnitude of the voltage gain. For a logic inverter with a gain of 5, CGT looks like 6 times CGT at the input and CGT times 1 plus the gain. In a well-designed logic cell at an advanced node, Miller multiplied CGT can be the dominant contributor to input capacitance, not the intentional gate capacitance over the channel, the parasitic fringing capacitance multiplied by gain. Reducing spacer dielectric constant, the K value, directly reduces fringing capacitance. Silicon nitride spacers at K of 7 were standard through the 90s. SiCO at K of 4 or lower became common as the node scaled. Air gap spacers, where part of the spacer volume is literally air at K equal to 1, have been investigated as future candidates. Every step down in K cuts fringing capacitance proportionally. Now, there's an irony in the FinFET and the GAA story that's worth naming directly. The whole motivation for moving to three-dimensional gate architectures was to increase gate control by wrapping the gate around more surfaces of the channel. That worked. But wrapping the gate around more surfaces also means the gate metal is now physically adjacent to more of the source drain region, which means more fringing capacitance paths. In a planar transistor, the gate has one edge facing the source and one edge facing the drain. In a FinFET, the gate wraps around three surfaces of the fin. The gate source drain fringing perimeter tripled relative to the gate footprint. The spacer fills that perimeter, and the parasitic fringing capacitance, CGS and CGD fringe, grew with it. The source drain epitaxial regions in the FinFET and GAA are grown outside the gate footprint, in the axis regions. They are volumetric. They fill the space between the fins and the nearest neighboring fin. Two adjacent fins, if they are close enough, will have epiregions that are within a few nanometers of each other. That's epi to epi capacitance between the source of one transistor and the drain of its neighbor. It's a new leakage path that planar devices never dealt with. GAA adds another layer of complexity. The nanosheet stack creates vertical fringing paths from the gate metal between sheets to the source drain region above and below. The inner sheet regions are tightly enclosed by gate metal on all sides, which means electrostatic control, which is the whole point, but also maximizes the coupling area for fringing capacitance to any conducting region nearby. The industry response has been to co-develop the architecture and the parasitic mitigation together. Air gap spacers between gate and epi, inner spacers between the nanosheets to reduce the metal-to-metal coupling, gate dielectric optimization. None of these are afterthoughts. They're designed in from the start because the parasitic penalty from three-dimensional architecture is large enough that it would erase the electrostatic gain if not controlled. Foundries now publish parasitic resistance and capacitance targets alongside transistor parameters in their process qualification documentation. That shift from transistor only specs to cell level parasitic specs reflect how seriously the industry has internalized the problem. The figure of merit for circuit speed at the cell level is CV over I, capacitance times voltage divided by current. It captures everything: the parasitic capacitance you have to charge, the voltage swing required, and the drive current available to do it. A lower CV over I means a faster, more energy efficient logic cell. C over I has improved substantially from 65 to 3 nanometers. But decomposing that improvement, separating out how much came from a better intrinsic transistors versus better parasitic control, reveals that parasitic reduction accounts for a growing fraction of the gain at each advanced nodes. Contact metal transitions from tungsten to cobalt to ruthenium are each driven by specific contact resistivity targets that the previous material could not meet at the contact areas. Spacer transitions from silicon nitride to SiCO to air gap are each driven by fringing capacitance budgets. These aren't material science curiosity projects. They are engineering responses to specific parasitic targets in specific nodes. And this is why parasitic engineering is now a first class specialization inside leading foundries, not just a cleanup activity after the device team is done. The parasitic budget for a 3 nanometer cell is specified before the transistor architecture is finalized. The gate height, the epi dimensions, the spacer thickness, the contact size, all of these are constrained by the parasitic budget as much as by the electrostatics. When you get into detailed device modeling later in this arc, you'll encounter SPICE models that have explicit parasitic components extracted from 3D field solvers for each specific layout configuration. Those models don't look like the textbook MOSFET equations. They look like the textbook equations with a web of resistors and capacitors attached to every terminal. That web is what this video has been mapping. The intrinsic transistor and the parasitic overhead are not two separate problems you solve in sequence. They are one codependent design problem. And at 3 nanometers, the parasitics have as loud a voice in the room as transistor physics.